Consumer confidence is recovering. Quarterly GDP is growing. The unemployment rate is the lowest by historical standards. That's what the American press was constantly praising throughout 2025. And if you only look at those seemingly optimistic numbers, you might believe that America is on its way back to prosperity. But behind that is a truth that few newspapers or media outlets will tell you. Behind that development, millions of middle-class Americans have vanished from the economy. Because while America is beautiful on paper, the real life of the middle class is entering its worst period in decades. Rent is rising faster than income. Healthcare costs are unaffordable. Food prices are at record highs. And mortgage rates make the dream of home ownership almost a luxury. Families who were once able to save each month now have to scrape together every penny to pay their bills. Many people work full-time, but still don't earn enough to support their children, pay off debts, or save for emergencies. The concept of the middle class, the foundation of American social stability, is shrinking faster than at any point in the 21st century. And when this class collapses, the American dream collapses with it. In today's video, we'll unpack everything behind the strange contradiction between beautiful economic indicators and the increasingly depleted lives of the people, to understand what truly destroyed the American dream. Many financial news reports describe a strong recovering America, GDP steadily increasing from 2.5% to 3%, and the unemployment rate stabilizing around 3.7%. The press repeats these numbers like a collective lullaby, as if they represent the health of society as a whole. But behind that bright facade lies a completely different reality, where millions of people don't feel the country is moving forward at all. On the contrary, they feel they are falling behind. A survey by Pew shows that 65% of Americans say their income is not keeping pace with the cost of living. For them, growth isn't a curve on a graph. It's the bills this week being higher than last week. The economy is described as prosperous, but in reality, the majority of the population is facing a gradual decline in financial capacity. That gap becomes even more apparent when looking at Federal Reserve data. 40% of adults cannot immediately afford an emergency expense of $400. This means that a flat tire, a sudden toothache, or a sick pet can also become the downfall that a family can't recover from. While the cost of living is skyrocketing, the median income of the people only increased by 0.1% in a year. At the same time, housing and healthcare increased by double digits. On one side is an income chart as flat as still water. On the other is a cost curve as steep as a mountain slope. It's not hard to understand why many people feel they are caught in an uneven race, where wages are barely walking while costs are sprinting ahead, and the people are increasingly out of breath. According to statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of people working 2 or more jobs is at its highest level in over 2 decades. What was once considered the standard of stability, a full-time job, is now only enough to help them survive in the short term, no longer sufficient to dream of a stable future or the American dream as before. Conversely, the nation's wealth is concentrated in a very small group. The richest 10% hold up to 93% of the total stock market wealth. Economic growth is real, but it's happening at the top of society, where profits flow into the pockets of large investors, not the workers struggling at the bottom of the pyramid. The class that was once the heart and soul of America, the group capable of buying homes, raising children, saving and retiring, is now increasingly being pushed to the brink. Many people live paycheck to paycheck, have no savings, and are forced to cut back on all spending. The middle-class backbone once resembled an elastic spring, helping America absorb every shock. Now, that spring is compressed to the point where it can no longer bounce back. One of the reasons for this breakdown lies in the fact that the rate of increase in essential costs far exceeds the rate of increase in income. When housing, food, healthcare, and energy prices rise faster than people's ability to earn money, all macroeconomic indicators become meaningless figures, no longer relevant to their real-life experiences. The middle class became the group that had to bear the entire shock of the economy, even though they didn't create it and couldn't control it. And then, amidst all the praise that America is getting stronger, more and more people are becoming skeptical. Not just because they've become poorer, but because the glowing figures in the media seem to describe a country completely different from the one they live in every day. As if they were no longer a part of America. Can an economy be considered healthy if the majority of its citizens feel weaker each quarter? And if the numbers no longer reflect the truth, what are we relying on to understand reality? Perhaps the first answer lies right in the shopping cart, as we enter the supermarket where items that were once commonplace are now luxuries. If you want to see the true fluctuations of the American economy clearly, you don't need to look at Wall Street. Just stand in front of the grocery store counter on a normal afternoon. The carts that were once overflowing are now only carrying a few essential items. The shoppers' faces were intently focused on every number on the price list, as if they were solving a complex equation rather than choosing dinner for their families. That's the most accurate depiction of America right now. Not the GDP growth curve, but the increasingly empty grocery baskets. In recent years, Americans have faced the fastest rise in the cost of living since the 1970s. Food prices alone increased by an average of 25% between 2021 and 2024, a rise significant enough to upend the spending habits of tens of millions of families. Items that were once staples in the shopping cart, eggs, beef, milk, are now things that must be carefully considered before being added to the cart. At one point, egg prices increased by over 70%, and beef prices rose by over 30%, forcing many people to switch to cheaper, less nutritious meals. Eating, which is usually associated with family stability, is now a stressful equation. What's cheapest? What will last the whole week? What can be substituted to save a few more dollars? And prices don't stop at food. American household electricity bills increased by about 22% in just 3 years, while California alone saw a doubling in a decade. Unlike essential goods that can be cut back on, electricity and gas are unavoidable expenses. They are the foundation for daily life, and when that foundation becomes expensive, everything above it shakes along with it. More concerningly, the cuts are not only happening in luxury items. A Lending Club survey shows that 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, including nearly half of those earning over $0,000 per year. When even the high-income class is struggling with the cost of living, we're no longer talking about a crisis for the poor, but a widespread erosion, affecting even those in the backbone of America. Those subtle changes are redefining the concept of basic life. What was once considered natural, a full meal, a reasonable electricity bill, a weekend restaurant visit, has now become a series of cautious choices. Life, once full and comfortable, has now slipped into a state of calculation and caution. A trip to the supermarket can be a financially stressful time. An unexpected gas bill can throw off an entire month. What happens to a society when familiar necessities become a financial burden? And if even dinner requires careful consideration, is there any room for stability and hope in the future? Because when food prices have become a challenge and the cost of living has spiraled out of control, another pressure, deeper, more painful, awaits. Housing prices, which were once a symbol of stability, have now become the most visible symbol of impossibility. Perhaps nothing reflects the transformation of modern America more clearly than the housing market. Once a symbol of stability, of maturity, of a future with a foundation, now those roofs are slipping out of reach for millions of Americans. Housing is no longer just a place to live. It is becoming a special kind of commodity, something that people must compete for directly with investment organizations and massive capital flows just to have a chance to access. The median home price in the US is currently around $412,000, close to a historic high, while the median household income is only about $75,000. Based on affordability, this is the worst time in over 40 years. This turns very American dreams, buying a house, building a home, saving for the future, into burdens that many families dare not touch. And then mortgage rates hovered around 7%, adding another layer of lock to the door. At this interest rate, the cost of buying an average home could increase by hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan. For first-time buyers, what was once considered the first step into adulthood now feels like embarking on a never-ending climb. It's no surprise that the percentage of households able to afford a home has dropped to around 15%, the lowest level ever recorded. It's not that they don't want to buy, it's that they can't. A market that was once open to the working and middle classes is now only accessible to those with significant financial advantages. But what distorts the housing market the most isn't ordinary buyers. Nearly 1/5 of housing transactions in states like Arizona, Texas, and Georgia come from investment firms. Companies that can buy dozens of houses in a week with just a signature. People buying a home to live in have to compete with those buying in bulk for speculation, an uneven playing field from the start. Meanwhile, homeowners who bought earlier at 2 to 3% interest tend to hold on. They don't want to sell a house with such a low profit margin to enter a new market with borrowing costs that are double or triple. Consequence: supply is locked down, the market is scarce, house prices continue to escalate, and the cycle continues. And like all major upheavals, the consequences are not just on the charts. The number of homeless people nationwide has exceeded 650,000, the highest level ever recorded. Behind each of those numbers is a life pushed out of the flow of society. Families forced to sleep in their cars, elderly people setting up tents under bridges. Those who once had normal lives, but now only have a thin tarp to shield them from the wind. All of this reflects a painful truth. Housing is being securitized in a soft but brutal way. When real estate becomes a store of value for investors, the purposes of living and speculation are forced to collide. And in this collision, those who need a roof over their heads are often the ones pushed to the margins. How can a society function when the majority of its citizens are excluded from the dream of home ownership, which was once considered the benchmark of adulthood? And when the right to plant a small marker on one's own land is no longer possible, what is left for the middle class? Because even if someone keeps their roof over their heads, another risk lurks just behind the door. A risk strong enough to shatter any plans. Medical expenses, which are becoming the next wave that could sweep away what little stability remains. In any society, hospitals are often seen as humanity's last refuge. A place to turn to when the body can no longer cope, when families need reassurance, and when life is most uncertain. But in America today, hospital doors open onto a different reality, where a single night in the hospital can wipe out a year's income, and where every step into the emergency room carries the risk of becoming a financial death sentence. The United States is currently the country with the highest per capita healthcare spending in the world, reaching approximately $13,000 per year. That number, at first glance, seems to indicate a strong investment in health. But if you look deeper, it reflects a system that has become absurdly expensive. A night's stay in a hospital can cost between $10,000 and $15,000, an amount equivalent to 1/3 of the income for many middle-class families. And if you unfortunately need surgery or emergency treatment, the bill can quickly skyrocket to $20,000 or even $30,000. It is precisely such bills that have pushed nearly 100 million Americans into medical debt. This is no longer an exception, but has become a common pattern. Illness not only attacks the human body, but also the finances of the entire family. When a slip, a heart attack, or a simple surgery can bankrupt people for years, the healthcare system becomes the most common cause of bankruptcy for American households. Examples of unreasonable prices can be found every place. Insulin, an essential medication for diabetes, costs an average of $300 per vial in the US, while in Canada it's only about $35. This disparity isn't just about drug policy or production costs. It speaks to the imbalance between the need for survival and the price the healthcare system places on patients. Even those with health insurance are not immune to this cycle. Private health insurance premiums for an average household have exceeded $22,000 per year, and most of that is paid by the workers themselves. This makes having insurance sometimes feel like just a sense of security on paper, as high deductibles and out-of-pocket costs mean patients still have to cover most of their bills themselves. When healthcare becomes a financial risk, the middle class, which relies on stability to maintain its quality of life, loses the final buffer they once believed was safe. Illness, which is inherently unpredictable, has now become a constant threat to the future, family, and peace of mind. One fall can wipe out years of hard work. A single surgery can plunge an entire family into an endless spiral of debt. How can a society be sustainable if illness, an inevitable part of human life, becomes a financial burden? If hard work isn't enough to protect people from health risks, then what is their safety net? Because to cope with those enormous bills, millions of Americans have no choice but to go into debt. And from there, they are caught in a spiral that tightens each year, pushing them further away from the stability they once thought they had secured. If there's one image that can encapsulate the economic life of the American middle class today, it's not the glass office buildings or the new suburban developments sprouting up along the highways. That's the credit card statement on the kitchen table. A piece of paper with nothing flashy about it, but powerful enough to choke up an entire evening. Debt is becoming an invisible shackle tightening around the wrists of millions. Total US credit card debt currently exceeds $1.13 trillion, the highest level ever recorded. And with average interest rates exceeding 20%, those who are late on their payments have almost no chance of breaking free from that cycle. A small installment purchase, if payments are late, can turn into an increasingly deep hole, consuming all their financial efforts for years. Medical debt is another layer of pressure, silent but much heavier. According to KFF analysis, this type of debt accounts for approximately 41% of total personal bad debt. That means that nearly half of those who go bankrupt do so not because of excessive spending, but because they are trying to get well. An emergency room bill, an unexpected surgery, completely out of control, can immediately plunge even the most stable family into crisis. Auto loan debt, once considered normal in American life, is also becoming a new burden. The average loan is currently around $35,000. Along with sharply rising interest rates, owning a car, a near necessity in many states, has now become a long-term challenge. A simple mode of transportation turned into a debt that hung over them for years. When debt becomes the default state, the autonomy of each individual is narrowed. Instead of living according to personal choices, they live according to monthly payments. Dreams are shaped not by desire, but by interest. Future plans are not determined by value, but by debt. The consequences of the debt cycle are not just financial stress. It's the cumulative wear and tear of years, a form of mental exhaustion that sets in when people realize that no matter how much they do, it's not fast enough to escape the hole beneath their feet. A society cannot be sustainable when workers are trapped in a cycle of debt, forced to run endlessly without ever reaching the finish line. And what remains of freedom when most of a person's income must be spent on debt repayment? What's left of the American dream when every step forward is pulled back by the red numbers on the statement? The answer probably doesn't lie in finance, but in something deeper: trust. It is precisely this chain of pressures, from housing, food, and healthcare to debt, that is shaking what was once considered America's most precious asset. The belief that this system still has a place for ordinary people holds strong. Trust was once America's most valuable intangible asset. It's not recorded in GDP reports, nor does it appear in market indicators, yet it's the foundation upon which a vast society like the United States has operated for generations. However, today that foundation is cracking in a way that many people, especially those who witnessed the country's prosperous period, never thought they would see. Recent Gallup surveys show that trust in the US Congress is only about 7%, the lowest in decades. A number so small it's alarming, yet it reflects what millions of Americans feel every day. They no longer believe that the people who make the laws are living in the same reality as them. And it wasn't a fleeting dissatisfaction. It was a disappointment accumulated over many years of witnessing the gap between life and the promise widening. The media, which once served as a compass to guide society, is also no longer trusted as it once was. Only about 31% of Americans believe the press reports accurately. For many older people who once viewed the media as a serious part of civic life, this decline is not just a professional issue, it's a spiritual wound. They felt like they were walking through an information fog, where each channel told a different story, and none of the stories fully reflected the lives they were living. On the economic level, trust is also eroded, with about 2/3 of Americans believing that large corporations have exploited the inflationary period to raise prices excessively. This isn't just a feeling. It reflects consumer skepticism as they see prices soaring while the corporate profits reach record levels. The disparity between CEO and employee salaries, in some cases reaching 300-point point, has become the clearest symbol of the power imbalance. For those who grew up in a period when this disparity was much smaller, today's reality feels like a cultural shock. The America they grew up in is no longer present in the America of today. What does a society stand on if trust, once its pillar, is shaken to its core? And can that trust be restored when daily experiences consistently contradict the promises made by the system? As trust declines, people are starting to do something they rarely considered before: look beyond their borders. They began to wonder if the dream that once belonged to America, the dream of stability, security, and a clear future, might be residing elsewhere. And it was from that question that a new chapter of the story was opened. As we peel back the layers of the story, from inflated numbers to soaring prices, to a distorted housing market, a harsh healthcare system, a spiral of debt, and a collapse of trust, we see something that's not easy to admit. The American middle class, the very foundation that once supported national strength, is becoming more fragile than ever. But amidst all those harsh changes, one thing still hasn't disappeared: the desire. The aspiration to live in a more just society. The desire to leave a brighter future for their children and grandchildren than the past. The aspiration that the previous generation once believed in, that if you just worked hard, you would build a decent life, with a roof over your head, with opportunities, with dignity. If the American dream once helped an entire generation rise up strongly, what needs to change so that the next generation doesn't have to look for it elsewhere? And can a nation continue to grow if those who once believed in it the most are now the ones who feel most abandoned? If the story in this video resonates with your experience or that of your family, please share your thoughts below. You're not alone. And sometimes, just saying it is the first step toward healing. If you want these kinds of stories to keep appearing on the channel, please like, share the video with your loved ones, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next content. Your small click helps the video spread to many people who need to hear this. This video is not intended to criticize any organization, individual, or political faction. All analysis and data are compiled from reputable news sources, research, and surveys, and are presented to reflect social phenomena, encourage dialogue, understanding, and critical thinking. All conclusions in the video are based on observation and analysis, not financial, legal, or medical advice. Viewers are encouraged to verify information from multiple sources.